The part of you that was supposed to protect you is the part that is now destroying you. There is something inside you that needs things to be right, not just right in a casual way, right in a way that feels urgent, right in a way that, if left unresolved, produces a low hum of anxiety that never fully disappears. You check again. You replay the thought. You go back to make sure. And even when you confirm that everything is fine, the feeling that something is wrong returns almost immediately. Most people call this anxiety. Some call it OCD. Others just call it overthinking, and they carry it quietly, assuming it is simply the price of being alive in a complicated world. But Plato had a different name for it, and more importantly, he had a different explanation for why it happens. And once you understand what that means, the compulsive patterns of your mind will never look the same again. Plato believed the soul was made of three distinct and competing forces. You have already encountered this idea if you have been following this channel. But it is worth revisiting here, because it is the foundation of everything that follows. The first part is logos. This is your rational mind. It reasons, weighs evidence, plans, and deliberates. It is the part of you that knows, intellectually, that things are fine. The second part is epithemia. This is your appetite. It wants comfort, pleasure, and relief. It drives you toward food, warmth, distraction, anything that dulls the edge of discomfort. The third part is thumos, and this is where things get interesting. Thumos is not a word with a perfect translation. It is often rendered as spirit or spiritedness, but that does not quite capture it. Thumos is the part of the soul that responds to injustice, that demands things be done properly, that fights for what it believes is right. It is the seat of your sense of honor, your indignation, your need for order. Plato described thumos as the guardian of the soul. When the rational mind sets a standard, thumos is what enforces it. When something is wrong, thumos is what rises up and says so. When someone violates your boundaries, thumos is what makes you feel that violation in your chest before your rational mind has even processed what happened. In a healthy soul, thumos serves logos. It takes its direction from reason and carries it out with conviction. It is disciplined, purposeful, and oriented toward what is genuinely good. But what happens when thumos breaks? A disordered thumos does not disappear, it turns inward. This is the insight that changes everything. When thumos loses its healthy relationship with reason, it does not simply go quiet. It does not shut itself off and leave you in peace. It continues to do the only thing it knows how to do. It continues to guard. It continues to monitor. It continues to enforce. But now it is enforcing without clear direction. Now it is patrolling without a target. It detects threats that reason cannot verify, demands resolution for problems that cannot be solved, and flags dangers that do not exist. The result is a mind that cannot rest. You know this feeling. You have lived inside it. The thought arrives and thumos immediately raises the alarm. Something is wrong. Something needs to be addressed. Something must be resolved before you can move forward, and so you attend to it. You examine the thought. You check the door. You replay the conversation. You seek reassurance. And for a moment, thumos is satisfied. The threat has been addressed. The patrol is complete. But then, the thought returns. Because the thought was never really the problem. The problem is that thumos has lost its governing principle. It has become a guard dog without a fence to patrol. And a guard dog without a fence will guard everything. It will guard the yard and the street and the neighborhood and the entire city. It will never stop because it has no boundary telling it where its job ends. This is the compulsive mind, not a broken mind, a displaced guardian. Plato noticed that thumos has a particular relationship with honor and recognition. There is something specific about thumos that makes this worse. And it is something that modern psychology has only recently begun to articulate clearly. Thumos is not just concerned with external threats. It is also deeply concerned with status, with whether things are as they should be, with whether the self is whole, intact, and worthy. Plato described thumos as the part of the soul that swells with pride when praised and collapses with shame when condemned. This means that when thumos becomes disordered, it does not just patrol for physical danger. It patrols for symbolic danger, for anything that might mean something is wrong with you, for anything that might mean you have made a mistake, offended someone, failed in some way, or fallen short of the standard you have set for yourself. the intrusive thought that tells you that you might have said something wrong at dinner, the need to replay an interaction to confirm you did not offend someone, the compulsion to confess minor mistakes, because carrying the uncertainty of having done something wrong feels intolerable. These are not irrational responses. They are the responses of a thumos that has been tasked with protecting your honor, your integrity, your standing in the world, and that has no clear boundary telling it when the job is done. It is protecting you. It has simply forgotten what protecting you is supposed to look like. There is a reason this pattern tends to attach itself to things that matter most to you. If you have ever noticed that obsessive thoughts tend to cluster around the things you care most about, you have noticed something important. The person who values being a good parent finds their intrusive thoughts centered on harm coming to their child. The person who values their integrity finds their compulsions centered on confession and moral certainty. The person who values being loved finds their anxiety centered on whether the people in their life are secretly disappointed in them. This is not a coincidence. This is thumos doing exactly what it was designed to do. It guards what matters. The problem is that when it is disordered, it cannot distinguish between real threats and phantom ones. It simply knows that this thing is important, and therefore, it requires constant vigilance. Plato would have recognized this immediately. He wrote about the dangers of a soul in which thumos becomes untethered from reason. He described it as a soul that burns with intensity but has no clear direction, a soul that is full of energy and conviction but aims it at the wrong things, or at everything at once. The compulsive mind is not a weak mind. It is often an extraordinarily intense one. It is a mind with a highly active guardian. The tragedy is not the intensity. The tragedy is the misdirection. Plato's solution was not to silence thumos, but to reorder it. This is where Plato parts ways with a certain kind of modern thinking that treats anxiety as something to be eliminated. He did not want thumos destroyed. He wanted it disciplined. He wanted it restored to its proper relationship with reason, where it takes its direction from logos rather than operating autonomously. In practical terms, this means something specific. It means that the goal is not to stop the alarm from sounding. The goal is to give the alarm a legitimate authority to answer to. When thumos raises its alert, the question it needs answered is not just, is this real? That question often cannot be answered in a way that satisfies it, because a disordered thumos will always find a way to doubt the answer. The question thumos actually needs is this: who is in charge here? In a well-ordered soul, the answer is clear. Reason governs. Reason examines the threat, determines whether it is real, sets the appropriate level of response, and tells thumos when the patrol is finished. Thumos accepts this. It trusts logos. But in a disordered soul, thumos has become its own authority. It no longer defers to reason because it no longer trusts that reason is sufficient to protect what matters. So it keeps going. It checks again. It demands more certainty. It refuses to stand down. Restoring order means reinstating reason as the governing faculty, not by suppressing the alarm, but by training thumos to receive and accept the judgment of logos. This is not easy. It is the work of a lifetime. Plato knew this. He did not offer a quick resolution. He offered a direction. There is something else Plato noticed about the disordered thumos that most people miss entirely. Thumos is not just reactive, it is also proud. This means that a disordered thumos has a complicated relationship with getting better, because getting better requires admitting that the threats it has been patrolling were not real. And thumos does not like being wrong. Thumos is the part of you that feels shame when you have failed. And being told that the vigilance you have been maintaining was unnecessary is experienced by thumos as a kind of failure. This is why people with highly active compulsive patterns often find recovery counterintuitive. The instruction to stop checking, to sit with uncertainty, to allow the alarm to sound without responding to it, feels like surrender. It feels like abandoning the post. It feels like choosing to be irresponsible. But Plato would say it is the opposite. He would say that the willingness to sit with uncertainty, to allow reason to govern rather than the anxious guardian, is not weakness. It is the restoration of proper order. It is thumos finally learning to trust logos again. That is not surrender. That is the beginning of a well-ordered soul. You are not broken. You are a guardian without a master. This reframe matters more than it might initially seem. The standard narrative around anxiety and compulsive patterns is one of malfunction. Your brain is misfiring. Your chemistry is off. There is something wrong with you that needs to be corrected. And while there are absolutely neurological dimensions to these experiences that are real and worth taking seriously, the Platonic frame offers something different. It offers you a story in which you are not defective. You are powerful in a way that has lost its orientation. Thumos is a force. It is one of the three great forces that Plato believed made up the human soul. It is not a flaw. It is a faculty. And like any faculty, what determines whether it serves you or controls you is whether it is properly governed. The person with a highly active thumos, with a mind that cannot stop monitoring and checking and trying to resolve every uncertainty, is not someone who has too little. They are someone who has enormous capacity for vigilance, for care, for taking things seriously. The question is simply whether that capacity is being directed by reason or whether it has broken loose and started directing itself. Plato believed the soul could be reordered. He believed that the work of philosophy, of genuine self-examination, of learning to see clearly and govern yourself accordingly, was precisely the work of restoring that order, not eliminating the guardian, restoring the guardian to its proper place. The compulsive loop is not random. It follows a logic that thumos understands perfectly. One more thing before we close. If you examine the structure of a compulsive pattern, you will find it is not chaotic. It has a clear internal logic. Something threatens what matters. Thumos raises the alarm. An action is taken to address the threat. The threat appears resolved. Thumos is briefly satisfied. The threat returns because nothing has actually changed in the underlying dynamic. Thumos raises the alarm again. This loop does not end because the loop was never designed to end. It was designed to protect. And a guardian that is doing its job properly does not stop guarding just because the threat has been addressed once. A threat that returned once can return again. The only way the loop ends is if thumos receives clear and credible direction from a governing principle that it trusts. And that trust is not built in a single moment of insight. It is built gradually through repeated experience of reason, stepping in, making a call, and holding the boundary even when thumos pushes back. Every time you sit with the uncertainty, every time you allow the alarm to sound and choose not to perform the ritual, every time you let reason say this is handled and resist the pull to check again, you are rebuilding the relationship between logos and thumos that a well-ordered soul requires. Plato called this process the education of the soul. He did not think it was comfortable. He thought it was necessary. And he thought it was the most important work a person could do. This is what ancient philosophy offers that modern language sometimes cannot. When you are told that you have anxiety, you are being given a diagnosis, a description of a pattern. When Plato tells you that your thumos is disordered, you are being given something different. You are being given a story about what you are and what you are capable of becoming. You are not a person whose brain misfires. You are a soul whose guardian has lost its governing principle. And the path forward is not to medicate the guardian into silence. It is to rebuild the authority that the guardian is waiting to serve. That is a harder path. It requires more of you. It requires the kind of sustained self-examination and rational discipline that Plato spent his entire life describing and advocating for. But it is also a more honest path, because it does not ask you to become less than you are. It asks you to become more. It asks you to become the kind of person whose reason is strong enough, clear enough, and trustworthy enough that your thumos finally agrees to follow. The guardian is not your enemy. It never was. It is waiting for you to become the master it was always meant to serve.